On this Memorial Day weekend, I thought it would be appropriate to make a video about post-traumatic stress syndrome and alcoholism that's attached often to it, and then suicide. Because, everybody doesn't die in conflict. And this Memorial Day weekend, we think of the men and women who died from bullets and shrapnel and bombs. But there's also other people who die when they get home. It's not as direct as dying in conflict. But many of the men who serve and women who serve will die from post-traumatic stress syndrome, which is followed with alcoholism and eventually suicide. So maybe they don't die on the streets of Fallujah or in Iraq or Iran or Vietnam. They might die on the streets of Los Angeles or Detroit or New York or Chicago or some small town in the United States. They die alone, and they're not going to get a Purple Heart, but they will get they'll get an official flag handed to their family. But we should remember those people just as much as the ones who died in conflict, because they were affected, maybe not by bullets and shrapnel and bombs, but even a worse affliction, which is mental health care, which is post-traumatic stress syndrome is a very, very real and all-encompassing problem. So we have to remember it's not just our bodies, but our minds that come back wounded. And let's remember these people on this Memorial Day weekend. Now, there's an interesting article by a PhD, Kathleen M. Chard, who is has a PhD in psychology, and her article is specifically about post-traumatic stress syndrome. Now, the time between in modern history rather, between the Vietnam War and the war in Afghanistan, including Operation Enduring Freedom, 14 to 22% of returning vets suffered from post-traumatic stress syndrome. Now, PTSD is characterized by trauma, nightmares, flashbacks, sleeping disturbances, withdrawal from people and places, and depression. All of these stresses can bring on alcoholism, alcohol use disorder, and eventually can lead to suicide as well as the alcohol itself. Now, veterans themselves are 57% higher risk of suicide than those who have not served. We lose 17.5 suicides a day, and in 2021 alone, when the study was done, we lost 6,392 veterans to post-traumatic stress syndrome and suicide. And again, PTSD can lead to an impaired ability to function in social, educational, and work environments, which makes post-traumatic stress syndrome a very debilitating condition for all that have it. And these statements are actually supported by the Department of Veterans Affairs. So again, let's remember everyone who's died either directly or indirectly because of foreign wars. And let's remind ourselves of how important it is to remember our military who died in conflict and at home. And again, thanks for listening.